A library at night doesn't go quiet. It works quieter. Paper breathes. Spines settle. 30 years I've listened to that hall, and I'll tell you. There's empty silence, and there's working silence. Mine is the working kind. Every night.
Report number 33. A city library, founded 1962, 400,000 volumes, one reading room, Idale. Every morning, the circulation system shows the night's borrowings. 2, 3, 4 titles, issued after closing, to reader's card number 1. The card was registered the year the library opened. The books come back on their own. This is the night librarian's statement.
Librarians don't fear late readers. We fear careless ones. Dog ears, coffee, margins, and ink. Card number 1 is the most careful reader this building has ever had. 60 years, 4,000 loans, not one damaged page. If he weren't impossible, we'd have given him an award. Instead, we gave him what libraries give their best readers. We gave him quiet.
The pattern runs like clockwork built by someone who respects clocks. At morning reconciliation, the system lists the night's loans against card number 1, issued 1962, auto-renewed ever since, holder's record locked with a flag, the current software inherited from 3 systems back. Archival entry, do not edit. The borrowed titles are genuinely gone. She has checked the shelves at midnight and at 3. The gap on the shelf is real. The book absent in the honest, physical way books are absent. 1 to 3 nights later each returns. Standing in its place, return stamp in the paper loan slip that this library, alone in the region, never abolished. A stamp dated, inked, and pressed slightly harder on the left, the habit of a right-handed man stamping at the end of a long day. The selection is never random. History, physics, philosophy of time, archival science, 60 years of borrowing that reads, in aggregate, like the bibliography of a single, enormous, patient work. Which, this file will establish, is exactly what it is. The bookmarks were her way in. The returned volumes carry them, always one, always left, she came to understand, deliberately. A marker saying here, this page mattered. Tram tickets. The old paper kind, 5 kopeck stock, route number 9, crisp, unfaded, as if bought that evening from a conductor who has not existed for half a century. Route 9 was withdrawn in 1971. She looked it up in the Transport Museum's archive, because by then she was looking everything up. Its line ran from the university quarter, the professors' houses on the embankment, to the library steps. A commuter's route. Someone, the tickets say, still rides to work the old way. On the marked pages, pencil underlining, ruler straight, the pre-war conspectus discipline nobody teaches anymore, never in the margins, never touching the text, removable by any student with an eraser and respect. She began copying the underlined passages into a notebook of her own, night by night, loan by loan. They cohere. 60 years of fragments assemble into an argument. One argument developing, doubling back, sharpening, on the nature of unfinished processes. On whether time closes what people cannot. She realized somewhere around her 3rd notebook, reading someone's research. In progress. From the inside.
I've worked circulation for 18 years. You can tell everything about a reader from what they do to a book. This one underlines in pencil by ruler and leaves a tram ticket so you know which page he'd want back first if the building burned. That's not a ghost. That's a scholar of the old school. We don't get them anymore. Apparently we get them still, just on a different schedule.
The escalation was procedural, as this archive prefers. One morning the reconciliation showed something card number 1 had never done in 60 years. A request for a title the library does not hold. An interlibrary loan application, filed at 2:11 a.m., correctly formatted, routed to the regional depository. From a terminal that logs no session, under a card flagged read-only, through a module that, per the vendor's documentation, cannot initiate requests without a staff login. The vendor consulted, replied that the request could not exist. The regional depository, unconsulted, replied that the book was on its way. It arrived in 9 days, a 1950s monograph on the perception of duration, deaccessioned everywhere else in the oblast. She processed it, and then did what 18 years of trade instinct told her to do with a book an impossible reader had gone to impossible lengths to obtain. She didn't shelve it in general stacks. She set it on the night returns trolley by the reading room door, face up, spine toward the aisle, the way you leave something for a colleague who comes in after you leave. In the morning, the book was gone. The lone slip in the tray carried the issue stamp, card number 1, and, in the remarks field, a field the system cannot populate, a field that exists only for human pens, 3 words in a small, even fountain hand. Thank you for assisting. Since that night, she curates. New acquisitions cross her desk anyway. The ones that touch his subject, time, memory, the archaeology of the unfinished, she sets on the trolley, spine to the aisle. They go out, all of them, 1 to 3 nights each, and come home with tram tickets in them. Except once. One title sat untouched for 2 weeks, a fashionable new monograph, well-reviewed, squarely on his theme. She almost took it personally. Then the serious journals arrived, and with them a review that dismantled the book. A foundational date wrong, a primary source misquoted, the argument built on the error. He hadn't declined it, she understood, reshelving the thing with new respect for her reader. He had reviewed it. Card number 1, 60 years into his work, does not waste nights on books that get the dates wrong. And her acquisitions desk now has, she admits, the most exacting quality control in the regional system. She watches what the night leaves on the trolley.
A reader 60 years into one subject. I love those. They're why the trade exists. What frightens me isn't him. It's the shape of the work. I've copied his underlinings for 3 years, and the argument is converging. The loans are getting narrower, the way research narrows when the writing has started. He's finishing. And I keep asking myself the question you ask at the end of any great borrowing history. When a man finishes the work of a lifetime, what does he do with the lifetime? And what does he do after?
The exhibit. The physical registration card for reader number 1st, preserved in the founding cabinet, filled out in 1962, in the front desk hand of that era. Complete but for the holder's name, which is entered as a file reference, this archive has not been permitted to result. The expiry field is the reason this report exists. Where 60 years of reader's cards say 1 year, renewable, card number 1 says, in the founding registrar's typescript, valid until completion of the research. Grounds. Agreement number 1, reading room clause. The agreement, in the tradition this archive has documented across a hotel, a station, a hospital, and a plant, is cited and not attached. The card has been renewed automatically through 4 catalog systems and 1 digitization, surviving each migration, the IT contractor noted in 2011, like a name that moves house with the family. The research, the card implies, is not complete. The card, as of this morning, is still valid. The report remains open, unresolved, a quiet one. Before the next report, a fragment. Fragment 15. The bindery ledger of the same library. Once a quarter, for as long as the ledger runs, 1 item arrives for repair marked private commission, standing service. The same book every time. A philosophy title, printed 1927. The wear is always the same. Spine fatigue at the natural opening. Corner softening at the lower right. The wear, the binder's intake notes state, of daily reading. The library's own copy of the same edition stands in the stacks, pristine, untouched since accession. The binder of 30 years was asked whose book he has been maintaining. His statement is preserved. I repair somebody's desk copy. Desk in the literal sense. A book that is opened every day by the same hands at the same angle. 60 years of every day. You can read the devotion in the hinges. The commissioning party per the ledger, all 60 years. The fun. Standing service. No invoice has ever been issued, and no invoice, the ledger notes in a founding-era hand, is to be expected. This fragment remains unprocessed. This fragment remains unprocessed. Report number 34. The library's conservation workshop, where damaged books are rebuilt, page by page, by a restorer of 19 years' service. Her statement concerns the work orders that arrive before the damage does. The workshop has been repairing the future, quietly, since 1965. She is the first restorer to ask what happens if you simply refuse to hand the future back.
A conservation order is a boring document. Item, damage, treatment oil. You'd never read one twice. Unless the damage column describes a burn on page 214, and you're holding the book, and page 214 is perfect. Then you read it many times. Then you put the book in the queue anyway, because the order says to. That's the workshop's whole secret. We follow orders that haven't happened yet.
The order that recruited her into this file arrived 4 years ago, routed from the Special Holdings Fund with the priority flag the workshop never questions. Item: a 1950s atlas, on loan to a reader in the River District. Damage: thermal, page 214, localized char, lower margin. Treatment: full repair, return to holder. She recalled the book, pristine. Page 214, clean. Away. She filed a query. The fund did not reply. The order remained in force, and workshop discipline is workshop discipline. She prepared the repair materials for a wound that did not exist and set the folder aside. 9 days later, a kitchen fire in the River District contained no casualties, one shelf scorched. The reader returned the atlas apologetically for assessment. The char sat on page 214, lower margin, localized, matching her 4-day-old work order. She measured it twice to the millimeter. She repaired it in an afternoon. The materials were ready. Then she went into the workshop's archive, because 19 years of discipline had just changed careers into 19 years of evidence. The pre-orders run back to 1965. 2, 3 a year. Flood, fire, crushing, dam. Everyone matches a misfortune that arrived on schedule at the address of whichever reader held the book. The archive taught her the workshop's inherited posture. Repair ahead, return the book, say nothing, the library ensuring its fund against a future it declined to discuss. She tested the posture once, and the test cost her a month of sleep. A fresh pre-order, water damage, full block, unrecoverable, against a volume on loan to a young mother in the Hill District, a woman she knew by sight, a stroller parked by the returns desk every second Thursday. The restorer broke every rule gently, telephoned about a routine exemplar exchange, collected the doomed book, issued a duplicate copy in its place. The original she locked in the workshop's safe. If the book is the target, she reasoned, move the book. 8 days later, a riser burst in the Hill District. The young mother's flat flooded wall to wall, the nursery, the bookshelf. The duplicate drowned with the shelf. The original sat dry in her safe, and the pre-order closed itself in the ledger with a completion mark she did not enter. The flood had not followed the book. The book had merely known the address. A censor, she understood. Sitting with the swollen duplicate on her bench, the fund's books are censors. Wherever they lie, the workshop reads the weather of that house. 1965 to now, the library has held a meteorology of misfortune, and has only ever repaired the instruments.
The duplicate drowned and the original stayed dry, and I sat there understanding that I'd saved paper. Diamond. The flood went where it was going regardless. I'd just taken the thermometer out of the room, and the fever came anyway. 60 years this workshop has been proud of its repairs. Nobody ever asked the only question in the trade worth asking. We can read the forecast. Has anyone tried changing the weather?
The answer arrived as another order, and this one differed by a single administrative fact that changed everything. Item: a new acquisition, cataloged the previous week. Damage: water full block, unrecoverable. Holder: none. The book stood in the new arrival's bay, unissued, a censor not yet installed in anyone's home. She read the order 3 times, and the third reading produced the thought she describes as the loudest of her career. The forecast requires the instrument to be in the house. No instrument, no reading. Perhaps no weather. She pulled the book from the bay, logged it into workshop quarantine under a maintenance hold she invented on the spot. Deacidification assessment, open-ended, and shelved it in her safe beside the dry original from the Hill District. Then she watched. The pre-order sat in the ledger, unclosed, week after week, the first in 60 years to hang incomplete. No completion mark appeared. And across the city, in the circulation records, she now monitors the way other people check horoscopes. No flood reached any reader on the fund's radar that season. Not one water claim, not one soaked shelf among the library's borrowers. The misfortune denied its address had, as far as any ledger can prove a negative, not occurred. The workshop had spent 60 years repairing consequences. She had canceled a cause, or postponed it. The order, she notes, is still open. She checks the safe weekly. The book stays dry, and so far, does everyone.
I want to be honest about what I did and didn't do. I didn't save anyone. I can't prove a flood that never happened. All I can show you is an open work order, a dry book in a safe, and a season with no water claim. In this workshop, that's what a miracle looks like. A line in a ledger that never closes. I can live with that. I've decided I can live with that very well.
The exhibits. The workshop instruction of 1965, founder-era typescript, still in force. Orders of the Special Holdings Fund are to be executed prior to the onset of circumstances. Circumstances are not subject to disclosure. Grounds. Agreement number 1. And beside it, the newest document in this file, her own memo, drafted last spring, titled with deliberate bureaucratic blandness, on the procedure for deferred issue of selected acquisitions. It proposes, in language no lawyer would blink at, exactly what she did. Quarantine before circulation at the restorer's discretion. The director signed it, she reports, without reading past the header. The signature of this archive. The signature of every institution in it. The unread yes that keeps every night shift running. Her memo now carries an internal registry number and the force of policy. Somewhere in the fund's ledgers, she likes to think, a very old reader noted the change and approved. The report remains open, unresolved. A quiet one. 2 reports remain. You have seen the borrowing, and you have seen the binding. What follows is the reader himself, as close as this archive has ever stood to one. And the night he asked his last question. Report number 35, filed by the keeper of the reference desk, the department that answers questions. In the corner of his office hangs a wooden box the library never retired. The bibliographic request box for written queries, pen and paper, answered by hand since 1962. The public stopped using it decades ago. The box has never once been empty for long. This is his statement.
Reference work is a vow, if you take it seriously. Any question, answered exactly. Or not at all. Doesn't matter who asks. Doesn't matter how. The box is pen and paper, so the vow is pen and paper. My predecessor answered the box for 30 years. His predecessor started it. Nobody ever told me who we were answering. They told me the only thing that mattered. Answer well. He checks.
The rhythm is a scholar's rhythm. 2. 3 requests a month, more in winter, fewer in summer. 60 years of seasons, 1 fountain hand. The questions are the narrow, merciless kind that only serious work generates. Confirm the date of a provincial decree. Verify a quotation against the first edition, not the reprint. The reprint, the requester notes with a scholar's dry asperity, is corrupt. Establish whether a certain journal ceased in March or April of its final year. Each blank appears in the box overnight. Each answer, researched, written out by hand, initialed by the keeper of the era, is placed in the box at closing. Each morning the box holds only its own emptiness and, in due time, the next question. The department has kept carbon copies of its answers since the beginning, because reference departments keep everything and the copies fill 9 binders. He read all 9 when he inherited the desk. It took him a winter, and at the end of it he understood what 60 years of keepers had been doing without ever naming it. They were not answering random questions. Read in sequence, the queries have a spine. Dates, sources, editions, the load-bearing checks of one long, single, patient piece of work. The proof arrived through format. In the later binders, the questions change shape. They begin to carry locators, page such and such, note such and such, checking citation against source. Not the open questions of research, but the closed questions of verification. The queries of a man walking his own footnotes, one by one, confirming each stone in a bridge already built. A manuscript, the keeper realized, was being proofed. Somewhere on the far side of the box, the work this library has serviced for 60 years, the work this file has watched being borrowed for, bound for, and insured against the weather for, had entered its final state. And the tempo confirmed it. Through his 8 years on the desk, the intervals short. 2 questions a month became 4, became weekly, became, this past year, a blank in the box almost every Monday, each smaller than the last. The queries shrinking as the remaining doubts shrank, until they were checking single commas of history. Any scholar's widow, he says, would recognize the pattern. It is the tempo of a man who has begun to see the end of a lifetime's table of contents, and is suddenly, after 60 years, in a hurry.
The last winter, the questions got so small they were barely questions. One asked me to confirm a single date he'd already cited correctly 40 years ago. I checked the old carbons. He'd had it right since before I was born. He wasn't verifying the work anymore. He was saying goodbye to it. Scholars do that. You check the things you know are right, one last time, the way you walk through a house before you hand over the keys.
The last blank arrived on a Monday in spring, and it broke the format of 60 years. No locator, no source to check. The fountain hand, unhurried as ever, asked the department's final service, "Kindly verify the dedication." Is it correct to say, to the library, the only place where time works for us and not against? Below it, separated by a line drawn with the old ruler discipline, a paragraph the keeper has deposited with this archive and reads, he admits, more often than is professional, and, to the desk, my thanks. 60 years of exact answers, not one wrong date. Whatever stands in this work stands on your answers. You were my hands. The keeper sat with a blank for most of his shift. Then he did what the vow required. He researched the question, is the dedication correct? With full seriousness, weighing the grammar, the sentiment, the claim itself against 60 years of evidence in 9 binders. And wrote the department's answer in the space provided, initialed it, and placed it in the box at closing. The answer read, verified. The dedication is correct. It has been our honor to serve. By morning, the box was empty. It has been empty for the first sustained stretch in 63 years ever since. He found the postscript 2 days later, filing the blank into binder 9. On the reverse, in the lower corner, in script half the usual size, the way a man adds a thing he almost didn't allow himself to ask. One more matter, if the desk will indulge me. Kindly confirm that table 7 stands free on Thursdays, from autumn. A student will come. She will need the etymological dictionary, the 1913. It is in poor condition. The bindery should be warned in advance. The keeper checked. The 1913 dictionary's spine is, indeed, failing. The intake assessment he requested from the workshop confirmed it within the week, and the workshop, this file can report, has already scheduled the repair ahead, as is that workshop's custom of any circumstance. The reading room's booking sheet now carries a standing note, entered by the keeper in his own hand and countersigned unread by the director. Table 7, reserved Thursdays from autumn. He does not know who she is. Neither possibly does she, yet. The last act of a 60-year reader, the keeper submits, was not about his own work at all. It was a referral. He was handing his people on.
60 years he asked us questions, and his very last one was about somebody else's chair and somebody else's dictionary. That's the whole man, right there, in one postscript. And here's what I keep thinking. Up at the desk. Come autumn, some girl is going to sit down at table 7 for the first time, and everything will already be ready for her. The chair, the lamp, the book, repaired. She'll think it's luck. It isn't luck. It's a colleague she'll never meet holding the door.
The exhibits. The Request Registry, Volume 1, 1962. The first blank in the fountain hand is dated the last week of October. The library's own memorial corridor, the portraits of distinguished readers, includes an obituary from the 3rd week of that same October. A professor of history, dead at 51, his doctoral work, the notice records, complete in manuscript and undefended. The subject of the undefended manuscript, as printed in the obituary, matches, word for word, the theme a night librarian in this file has spent 3 years assembling from pencil underlinings. And the obituary closes with a line from the professor's widow that 63 years have turned from grief into logistics, the way this archive has watched happen before. He asked me to tell his colleagues, the work will be finished. The first question reached the box 7 days later. The desk has been answering ever since. The report remains open, unresolved. A quiet one. One more fragment before the final report. Fragment 16. A furniture write-off act, the dullest genre the library owns. Table 7 of the reading room has been listed for replacement 3 times in 60 years. Once in the 70s, once in the 90s, once during the renovation of 2012. All 3 times, the line is struck through by hand. 3 different directors, 3 different decades, 3 identical resolutions in the margin, 2 words each. Table occupied. No director has ever been asked to explain the resolution. No director, the minutes suggest, has ever needed to. The table stands. The current inventory lists its condition in a category that exists for no other item of furniture in the building, in use. This fragment remains unprocessed. This fragment remains unprocessed. The final report, and the voice that opened this file. The night guard of the reading room, 30 years of rounds among sleeping shelves, and one standing etiquette no handbook contains. At closing, he darkens the hall lamp by lamp, and leaves the lamp of table 7 burning. He has never asked why. This is his statement, and it concerns the week the lamp changed its habits.
You can hear the pages turn. That's where you came in. 30 years. That sound was my clock. Steady, unhurried, a page every few minutes. A man reading for the ages. Then, this spring, the rhythm broke. The pages started turning fast. And a guard knows over time when he hears it.
For 30 years, the working silence of the reading room kept scholars' hours. The lamp of table 7 warming at midnight. The soft occasional turn of a page. The lamp dimming out with the first gray of morning. A rhythm so reliable the guard set his rounds by it. This spring the rhythm went to deadline. The lamp came on earlier. 10:30, once before the front doors were fully locked. The page turns quickened to the pace of a man checking rather than reading. Some nights he heard from his post by the catalog hall the small percussion of activity the room had never produced in his service. A pencil set down hard. A chair creaking with the shifted weight of long sitting. Once, he logged it, because 30 years of habit logs things. A long breath, exhaled slowly. The sound a man makes at the end of a chapter he has waited a lifetime to write. The guard adjusted his rounds to give the far aisle a wider berth, dimmed the corridor lights an extra notch, and told the morning shift nothing, in the tradition of every night worker in this archive. The work was closing. You could hear it closing. His job, as he understood it, was to guard the closing. It ended on a Thursday at 3:10. From the reading room came a sound 30 years had never once produced. The chair of table 7 pushed back. Deliberately. The drag of wood on parquet. The settle of a room standing up. Then, footsteps. Not toward the exit, along the stacks, slow even, pausing at each range the way a man pauses at the doors of workshops he is leaving. The western wall, then history, then the periodicals, a full circuit of the collection at the pace of farewell. The guard stood at his post and did not move, because etiquette is etiquette, especially at the end. The footsteps finished the circuit and came up the center aisle, toward him, past him, the air moving with them, carrying the faint dry warmth of lamplight and old paper, and stopped at his desk. And onto the desk, into the circle of his own lamp, out of no hand that he could see, came a sheet of paper, laid, not dropped, squared to the desk edge, the way documents are presented to an official whose office you respect. Fountain hand, unhurried, the letters of a man who had all the time in the world and has just finished needing it. The work is complete. Kindly convey it to the fund. My thanks for the shifts. Table 7 is free. The lamp of Table 7 went out at 3:17, by itself, as always. But for the first time in 30 years before the dawn, the way you switch off the light in a room, you will not need tomorrow. And in the morning, on Table 7, squared to the table edge, stood the manuscript. A stack the height of 2 bricks, tied in archival twine with a binder's knot. The title page in the fountain hand, this library has been reading sideways for 63 years. The subject, word for word, the theme from an October obituary. Begun, the page states plainly, 1962. Completed this year. The library did what libraries do with gifts. The formal donation procedure, the intake committee, the director's signature, applied, the minutes record, without the director reading past the header. In the founding tradition of every institution this archive has visited, the manuscript was catalogued within the week. And here the file pauses on a detail the catalogers cannot explain and did not have to create. The shelf assignment. In the dissertations section between 2 call numbers, a gap has stood as long as any staff member remembers, held by a place marker of founding-era stock, unlabeled, dusted around for decades because no one felt entitled to remove it. The new call number, generated by the system's ordinary arithmetic, resolved to that gap. Exactly. The manuscript slid into a space that had been waiting for it. The guard submits, since before most of the staff were born. The catalogers open the manuscript once, for the record, and the record is why this file exists in the form it does. The final page is an acknowledgments list, and it is written to names. The night librarian of the circulation desk, by surname, for the trolley and the interlibrary loan. The restorer of the conservation workshop, by surname, for the manuscript's phrase, repairs beyond the ask. The keeper of the reference desk by surname and his 8 predecessors, listed in order, for 60 years of exact answers. And the night guard by surname for the shifts. 4 people who, this archive can attest, did not know one another's names until a dead man's gratitude introduced them. The staff of a research project, none of them knew they were staffing, acknowledged the way scholars acknowledge. Precisely, completely, in print. Below the names, 1 closing line, and the guard asked that it be read, exactly. The errors that remain are mine. There was time enough.
30 years I guarded that room, and people ask if I was ever afraid. No. I'll tell you what afraid is. Afraid is the week after, walking rounds past Table 7 dark, and the hall silent the empty way. I hadn't been guarding books, you understand. I'd been guarding a man's work, the best post I ever stood. And then the work was done, and the room was just a room. And I felt like the last man at a plant they've closed. That lasted 8 days. Then the lamp came back on.
The last exhibit, and the file closes. The reading room's register, current week. A new entry, in the system's ordinary type. Table 7. Reader's card number 2. The card, the circulation records show, was issued 8 days after the manuscript entered the fund. Registered by no staff member on any shift. Holder's record locked with a familiar flag. Archival entry, do not edit. Expiry, valid until completion of the research. The subject of the new research is not stated. The lamp of Table 7, the guard confirms, resumed its hours the same night, warming at midnight. A page turning now and then, slow, exploratory, the rhythm not of a man racing a deadline, but of someone at the very beginning, reading widely, finding the edges of a question. 60 years, this archive observes, is how long a library keeps faith with one reader. It has now been asked to begin again. The books go out on the trolley. The bindery has been warned about a dictionary. A student is expected in autumn, and somewhere in the stacks, a place marker of founding era stock has appeared in a gap between two call numbers, unlabeled, holding a space. All 4 reports remain open, unresolved. And quiet ones, the whole file, quiet ones. Good night from the quiet report. The reading room is open. Mind the lamp on table 7.